Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody, I am so delighted to introduce my guest today, Dr. Ruth Gotian. Dr. Ruth Gotian is the Chief Learning Officer and Assistant Professor of Education in Anesthesiology and former Assistant Dean of Mentoring and Executive Director of the Mentoring Academy at Weill Cornell Medicine. She has been hailed by the journal Nature and Columbia University as an expert in mentorship and leadership development. In 2021, she was selected as one of the 30 people worldwide to be named to the Thinkers 50 radar list, dubbed the Oscars of management thinking, and by August was shortlisted as the top 8 emerging management thinkers in the world. She is also a semifinalist for the Forbes 50 over 50 list. In addition to publishing in academic journals, she is a contributor to Forbes and Psychology Today, where she writes about optimizing success. Her research is about the mindset and skill set of peak performers, including Nobel laureates, astronauts, and Olympic champions. Her forthcoming book, The Success Factor, will be out in January 2022. Please join me in welcoming Ruth Gotian. Welcome, Ruth.
Thank you. Hey, Tammy, how are you?
I am well. And I want to say an extra congratulations because I know you recently received your Thinkers 50 Radar Award. It's so exciting.
Yes, it went from top 8 to top banana. And
I know.
I was shocked. I was so shocked. I'm still shocked. And really, really humbled and excited about how we can teach people to be high performers. So it's thrilling. It's really thrilling.
Well, and I was thrilled for you.
Thank you.
Well, I've been following your work for a while and just really appreciate the kinds of information you put out there, and just really appreciate the work that you're doing, and I learn a lot from it. So I think it was so well deserved, and I'm excited to see what's next. So what's next is what we're going to talk about right here. So as you know, on Work from the Inside Out, we like to start with the earlier years, possibly, your roots, where you're from, and how you began in this world, and the kinds of things that might have been foundational for you as you started on your earlier career.
I'm part of a family. I am the only woman in my family in 4 generations. Everyone else, all the other women had to marry in. I think growing up, the women in my family, my grandmother, my aunt, they had a really pivotal subconscious impact on my life. So my grandmother was a pharmacist, and she went to Columbia University's pharmacy school. There were 300 men and 13 women in her class. So, and she was the kind of person that you will not talk over her. You will not tell her what to do. She was this 5 foot tall with heels powerhouse, wow. Absolute powerhouse. And she is the one who taught me how to stand up for what you believe in while still looking like a lady. And that really had a profound impact on me. So my grandmother, even though we were 2 generations apart, we were like sisters, very much so. I would go to the New York Public Library. I would bring her a book. She would finish reading it in a day, and then I would read it. No, take me 2 days, 3 days. But we would even read the same books. And then my Aunt Merle, also a foot shorter than me, she was also one of the first women She basically started the first co-op in New York City. She was huge in New York City real estate, featured in the Sunday Times, Over the Fold. And this was at a time when women weren't recognized at all. So I didn't grow up surrounded by many women, but the women who I was surrounded by were just huge personas in my life, and so impactful. I don't think they ever realized this. And my aunt and I, we laughed about it because I realized I didn't have any pictures with her.
Really?
And when I realized that, it's because when we would see each other, I didn't even realize I was doing this. I would always make sure that I sit across from her, because I was trying to memorize all of her moves, the way she held court at the table, just everything she did. So when I realized this now, every time we see each other, we make a point, barely before we take our coats off, we must get a picture together.
Oh, that's great. I love that.
So those are just some of the women in my life.
I love that. I love that. It's interesting that you figured that out. And I think about how much of communication or relationships have nothing to do with words, right? Just all that body language, and that you naturally wanted to, absorb her movements like that. That's really incredible.
And it's fascinating because I had zero interest in being a pharmacist. I had zero interest in going into real estate. But it was very evident to me that when they spoke, people listened. And when they did anything, it was done with class. It had a major, long-lasting impact on people. And these were the people who their persona, what they were able to achieve, and the way they did it by always being very close to family and community. That's what I wanted to emulate.
Wow. And were you aware that they were remarkable in that way at that point in your life, or even a few years later? I mean, not to say that there weren't other women like them, but I'm reflecting on the women who were role models in my life at that point. And there were some who I would say would resemble that, but maybe not quite in such a solid way, the way you're describing them.
They were different. I hadn't even realized that I was doing all this until well into adulthood. I always knew I was close to my grandmother. I knew that when my grandfather passed away, I moved in with her. It just seemed so natural to do that. And we would talk almost every single day on the phone, my grandmother and I. But I hadn't realized that that's what I was doing. I was probably in my 30s or 40s when I realized that this is what I was actually doing, is that I was really learning by watching.
Wow. So, and yet it's interesting that, oftentimes when you do admire those people in your life, I've seen a lot of people who do follow in their footsteps, go into pharmacy or real estate or something. So, but it never even occurred to you at that point.
No, not at all. I mean, it was very clear that I was going to go into a profession. It was this untold expectation.
Yes.
You go to school and you're going to you're going to be independent. You're going to have the ability to be independent, and you need to be able to have your own profession. You must have a driver's license. You should not ever have to depend on somebody else for a ride. So that strong independence was really valued. And I think that's what was important to me. Look, I was pre-med when I started college. That didn't last very long.
Oh, okay.
I quickly realized that while I appreciate and respect tremendously healthcare,
sure,
there are other ways to be involved in it without being a physician.
Right. Well, and by your example, we see that.
Right. I had to find my way into healthcare. Yeah. But I quickly realized that being a physician was not the way it was going to work for me.
Yeah. So I have a quick question for you about the driver's license thing or driving a car. It sounds like did you grow up right in New York City?
In the suburbs.
Oh, in the suburbs. Okay. So that's different then. All right.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, gee, because most of the people I knew who grew up in New York City didn't necessarily learn to drive right at, the ripe age of 15, 16. So I was thinking, that's really progressive if your grandmother and your aunt were telling you have to learn to drive a car, because people who grew up in the city didn't necessarily get that orientation quite that early. But now I get it. So you went to college pre-med and
switched to business.
You switched to business. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What made you switch to business? What were you thinking about that?
I sat in on one chemistry class, not a course, a 40-minute class. And I said, oh, hell no. Oh, hell no. And I loved math. So you would think I would love chemistry. There's a lot of math in chemistry, but it was quite evident that this was going to be very painful. So I was naturally attracted to management and leadership. So the business school, it never had occurred to me earlier that, you should actually major in something you're passionate about. And that was my first inkling. So I got my bachelor's and master's degrees in business. And then I went to work in finance and international banking.
Oh.
No one expects that one.
I was not expecting that.
I did that for 2 years. And I quickly realized that just because you're good at something doesn't mean you enjoy it.
Oh, yes. You're taking the words right out of my mouth. This is something I say to people constantly.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
But you did like math, though. So I can understand why you might have, been attracted to something like finance. Although when it comes to finance and international banking, the math really isn't the highlight there, is it?
No, I just didn't love it.
Yeah.
And I was good at it.
Yeah.
And I was on the special management track and got tenure within 9 months, which was unheard of. But it wasn't something that I enjoyed doing. So I left. I knew I always enjoyed working with students. And I was one of those people who, I was a hall director in grad school. I was very much involved in student affairs. So I knew I wanted to work in higher ed somehow. But I didn't really want to work with undergrads because I had done that, a lot of disciplinary issues. I've just been there, done that.
Yeah.
So I said, all right, who has the most to lose? And I said, well, I found out that there's something called an MD PhD program. These are the students who get the dual degree simultaneously. 7 to 8 year program. Our tax dollars cover it so we can create more physician scientists. So they finish both the medical degree and a PhD degree. Their tuition is paid for, they get stipends, et cetera. There's too much for them to lose, right? It's super competitive, 3.5% acceptance rate. You have a better chance of getting into Stanford than you do to get into this program. So I ran that program for 22 years. And
so how did you know? Now you went from 2 years. So did you go from bachelor's to master's right into the master's in business?
Yes.
And then you worked
finance.
Then finance, and you were clearly on a fast track there. And had the wherewithal or the self-awareness to realize, wow, I'm good at this, but I'm really not enjoying it.
Yeah.
And so how much time did it take you to sort of recalibrate and realize you wanted to work in higher ed professionally, and then have that kind of thinking about, well, who has a lot to lose here, to drill down to the MD PhD program? Because you said it, you just shared it, how you were thinking about it, but I'm thinking, how did that really play out in real life?
So it was evident to me that I wanted to be around high performers.
So you knew that back then?
I knew that then. I didn't know why, but I knew I wanted to be around high performers.
Okay.
And this program, it was really the best of the best. I mean, imagine what kind of person wants to go and obtain these 2 degrees. These are people who are already extreme high achievers. And then this is the top program within that in the country. And the reason I stayed so long was because I got to do everything from recruitment, admission, student affairs, budgets, operations, grants, marketing, public relations, alumni affairs, crisis management, everything except for financial aid. I did everything.
Because you filled different roles over time, or because it was a small staff? I'm trying to understand that.
So there was a staff, but it was a program within a medical school. But this program actually oversaw the entire gamut. So the students didn't really have to much deal with the other offices. We dealt with everything. Cradle to grave, as we called it. Yeah. So we knew everything about them. We would even notice if they got a haircut. So that is how we were so close and had such a great relationship to these students. And what I had quickly realized was that these students were remarkable. But even amongst this remarkable group, there's certain ones that float to the top. And I would think to myself, with some of them, I said, this one's one day going to be my boss. Because they were that good, and they had a presence, they had the ability to have an impact, and their work was just phenomenal. But nationally, we were having a very different conversation. Nationally, we were talking about those who were leaving what we call the physician scientist workforce, and we called that a leaky pipeline. And there was a shortage of physician scientists. We were really concerned that there were not going to be enough physician scientists, because these are the people who see a problem clinically and take it to the lab, find a solution, bring it back to the patient. Right. So all the conversations and the papers and even books were about those who were leaving the physician scientist pipeline. Mm-hmm. And I said, I think we're trying to answer the wrong problem. I think our problem is, how do we create more of the top performers whose work will more than make up for those who leave? So at the age of 43, while working there full time and raising my family and having elder care from my parents, I said, let's get a doctorate and find out.
Hey, why not? I did. So when you were looking for, as you said, the people who were in this program were all remarkable. And you said, but there were a few that really rose to the top. What distinguished those who rose to the top? What were the qualities about them? What did you see that distinguished them? Well, there were several things. I couldn't quite wrap my head around it, but it's one of those things, you know it when you see it. And I realized that scientifically, they were just making an enormous impact. But then they would also be able to have this commanding presence that when they spoke, when they gave their presentation on their work, everyone was just hanging on the edge of their seats. Everybody wanted to do more. They were always mentoring other people who were more junior to them. They were able to build this community. And that's when I saw with the students that I worked with. But where I worked, I was literally surrounded by Nobel Prize winners. And I noticed the same things in them. And I decided I really needed to take a deeper dive into this. So I actually, for my doctoral dissertation, I looked at the most successful physician scientists of our generation. And that was some of the biggest prizes that we have in the sciences, including the Nobel, but also others such as the Lasker, the Breakthrough. And then there were even 2 NIH Institute directors. There was a former Surgeon General. So people of that caliber. And then after I finished the doctorate, I just continued with the research. And I said, I wonder if the 4 things I found with the extreme, the high performance physician scientists, if I would find the same thing in other extreme high achievers. So I went about it and I started interviewing
astronauts and Olympic champions and CEOs and senior government officials. And what do you know, Tammy? They all do the same 4 things.
So what are those 4 things?
Yeah. So first I want to say that they are not habits, because we cannot copy other people's habits. Right. I'm a morning person. I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. If you're a night owl and don't go to bed till 3, you can't wake up at 5 a.m. It's just not going to work. But what you can do is you can emulate other people's mindsets. So what I realized with all of these people, the Nobel Prize winners, astronauts, Olympic champions, I quickly figured out that the Nobel Prize winning scientist is just like the Olympic champion figure skater. And the 4 things they all have in common is, 1, they have tapped into what we call intrinsic motivation. There's a fire from within why they do this, right? They're not doing it for external validation, a promotion, an award, a diploma. They would do this for free if they could. So for example, if someone in your family, God forbid, has cancer, you are going to work your hardest to try and make sure nobody else ever has to suffer from that. That is that fire that burns within you. You're not doing it for the Nobel. You're doing it so that no one else will have to face that suffering. No one else will lose another family member. There is that fire burning within. It's within you. You are intrinsically motivated. The second thing is, when you tap into what you are so passionate about, you are going to outwork everybody. You are not dropping your pen at 5 o'clock. So this doesn't mean you're going to work 60, 80 hours a week. It will mean that you milk the productivity of every moment of the day. You are not wasting time on things that don't have a high impact. So they really know how to shut off distractions and focus and work. And also the way they approach challenges is very different. So instead of questioning if they will overcome a challenge, and challenges happen to all of us, instead, their focus is on how to overcome the challenge, not if, but how. They don't question. They have no problem with self-confidence. They don't question if they'll be able to do it. So when you're able to shift to how, now it's all about strategy. That's very different. So that's number 2. Number 3 is that strong foundation, which is constantly being reinforced. What they did early in their career, they do later in their career. The basketball players who were in the NBA and in the Olympics, the same thing they did there for practice are the same things you would see in any junior high gym. The NBA players just have better sneakers, but it's the same drills. One of the people who I interviewed was Neil Katyal, who has argued 44 cases before the Supreme Court, might be 45 now, 45 cases before the Supreme Court of the United States. He said he does 3 things before any case. The first one is he has what he calls moot court. Moot court are these practice sessions that you do. He said he did it with his first case. He did it with his 45th case. Same thing. Now, early in his career, he did 15 of them. Now he may do 5, but he didn't stop doing them just because he's argued so many cases before the Supreme Court. Right. The second thing is he has a binder that he brings with him to court. And that binder has every possible question he might get asked and the appropriate response to it. And he brings that binder to court and he puts it on the table in front of him. He said he's never once opened that binder, but preparing that binder prepared him to argue the case. He did that before his first case. He did that at the 45th case. And then the last thing he does is the night before the opening arguments, he goes to his kids and he tells them about the case in the simplest of terms. He did that the first case and the 45th case because he said, if you can drill it down to its core essence that a child can understand, then there won't be any question. Everyone will understand. So those are the things that he does. It's that strong foundation, which is constantly being reinforced. And last but not least, a lot of these people have terminal degrees, but they don't stop learning just because they won the Nobel.
Right.
They are continuously learning.
Yeah.
Now, they can't go to class. That's just not feasible, right? To go 6 to 8 hours of class, but they read books, they read articles, they watch YouTube, they listen to podcasts such as this one. They talk to people. They're all surrounding themselves, not just with one mentor, but a team of mentors.
Right.
And that is what's so important, that they are continuously learning. Yeah. So those are the 4: passion, work ethic, strong foundation, and informal learning.
Love that. Love that. And I don't want to boil this down to something very simple, but it does strike me that there are things about the way these people go about what they do. Really, it's more about who they be in many ways, right?
Yeah.
That are innate in nature. And there are things that people could emulate, or at least attempt to emulate to grow themselves, to improve themselves, right? But not everybody can be this way.
Well, the whole last third of the book, look, I'm an adult educator by training. So I can't just drop these 4 elements of success without teaching people how to actually implement these things into their own lives, because you have to do all 4. You can't pick and choose. So the whole last third of the book, The Success Factor, teaches the reader how to find their intrinsic motivation, how to develop their work ethic, how to build strong foundations. What are the different techniques for informal learning? All of that is taught in detail in the last third of The Success Factor. And what we know is that adults like options. So I don't just offer one way, because what works for you, Tammy, may not work for me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And what works for you today may not work for you when you have a transition in your life, a new job, a child, a move, a pandemic.
Right.
So you need to have things you can choose from with every transition, which is why I say The Success Factor is a book you can keep on your nightstand. If one thing's not working, you just look for another option. There are literally a buffet of options that you can choose from. Figure out what works for you and go for it.
Love that. I love that. Oh, I can't wait to get the book in my hands. So, and it's remarkable to hear, from where you came, right? From the roots of describing your grandmother as if she was a sister to you in some ways. I've never heard somebody describe their grandmother that way. There's something really precious about that. But that connectedness and the fact that this interest of yours kind of came from within you. It's not something that you went and looked at outside of yourself and said, I think I'll be interested in this. The way you even walked us through your own journey, it's clear that came from within you. You didn't say, oh, I think I'll take this bright, shiny object. And this is sort of what we're talking about here with work from the inside out, is exactly these intrinsic pieces, the things that come from within, if we're paying attention, right? So in terms of how people make those transitions, how you've made transitions. So you said that you were with the MD, PhD program for 22 years. So, and we know that you were a semifinalist for Forbes 50 over 50. So my guess is that after 22 years, you probably did something else. I know you did. So tell us about your transitions and how you've taken this interest, which you clearly are passionate about, and where have things grown for you from there? Because I know you're doing a lot of different things.
I am. So I got my doctorate and still stayed with the MD PhD program. And then after that, I became an assistant dean for mentoring and designed and launched a mentoring academy and became chief learning officer at Weill Cornell Medicine, where I've been working for 25 years. But what I practice what I preach. So I say that I'm patient zero. There's the first thing, when I tell people you have to do all 4 elements, you must, but you have to start with that first one.
Mm-hmm.
Figure out your intrinsic motivation.
Mm-hmm.
So here I was connected to these high achievers, my students, the Nobel Prize winners all around me, but I hadn't yet made that connection that those were the people I was gravitating towards, until one day I did a passion audit where I found out the difference between what you're good at and enjoy, what you're good at but depletes you, what you don't enjoy doing, and what you would do for free if you could. And I did that on myself. And what I realized was I was really good at operations, really good at it. And I had done it for over 2 decades. But I had reached the peak and I wasn't getting the joy out of it that I got at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe one day I'll go back to it, but it was clear I wanted something more cerebral.
Yeah.
And that's when I actually switched from staff to faculty.
Uh-huh.
And that's really what allowed me to be able to do that. And if the passion audit is actually available with the book, The Success Factor, but if anybody wants it right now, they can just download it from my website. They just go to ruthgotian.com/passion audit, and they could start working on it right now, because
Excellent.
that was the first step for my pivot.
Wonderful. And we'll have that in the show notes so people can access that. That's great.
Great.
Wonderful. So you went from staff to faculty. Was that, so it's one thing to discover that for yourself. What did it take for you actually? I've worked in academic settings myself. What did it take for you to make that transfer from staff to faculty? I mean, you already had your doctorate, so I would imagine that it was a matter of either they had to create an opening or there was an opening for you.
They created these roles.
Oh, they did. They
created these roles. It really had to do with, one of the reasons I stayed in the MD PhD program was because we had a big grant renewal, and these grants are over 1,000 pages long. It takes a year to put together. And frankly, we got a perfect score on the previous one. And I wanted to know it wasn't a fluke. I wanted to try to get it a second time. So that was part of it. And we did get the perfect score. But the reviewers, you do a mock review before the big, the NIH comes. And the reviewers put in there that essentially they said, do something because Ruth Gotian is ripe to be recruited away.
Aha.
And that really got things going. But I love what I do now.
That put the bow on the package, huh? So to speak.
That did. But I've been blessed, especially with my current role, where I am able to create this scholarship and create this new knowledge. But more importantly, is help other people find their own success. And develop their own success. And if you want to talk about rewarding, making yourself successful, you're never going to get there. You're always going to get, you're going to achieve a little bit more, but that's always filled with doubt and imposter syndrome and all that. Yeah. But when you can help other people get successful,
yes,
that is a joy that keeps on giving. And yes. I get to do that for a living.
Yeah.
Doesn't get better than that.
Yeah, I agree totally. As a coach, I can totally agree with that. Absolutely. And so you have your own website, you have your affiliation with Cornell Weill, you do a lot of writing. You told me earlier you love to read.
Yes.
And I know I asked you earlier, so when do you stop? And you said, well, I love to be busy. I just love to be busy. So
it's because I'm not good at being idle. But, my mentor said to me, some people need a certain amount of stress in order to function. I'm that kind of person. But there is a tipping point, right? If it's too much stress, that's when you start to get burnout. But there's a certain amount of stress that for me is healthy because that's when I'm the most productive.
Right, right.
But I have actually learned how to leverage the time. So, for example, and this is part of the work ethic when I talk about milking the productivity out of every minute.
Yeah.
I alluded to earlier that I'm a morning person. So the morning person is when I'm at my sharpest. That's when I do all of my cognitive work, my writing, my editing, things like that. You get my best work in the morning hours. And frankly, I can get more done by 10 o'clock than I can the rest of the day because I'm that laser focused. I get into a state of flow, the whole bit. As the day goes on, my productivity starts to wane and I get slower, foggier, right? So I am very careful to the best of my ability to put non-cognitive tasks for the afternoon. So Zoom meetings are in the afternoon. Responding to emails is in the afternoon. Phone calls are in the afternoon. I don't waste my precious time in the morning.
I love that.
Those passive tasks.
Yeah, that reminds me of Dan Pink's book, When. He talks about that.
He endorsed my book.
And as he should, So when you think about what's next for you, even though I know what's next is you're launching a book in January.
Yes.
What else? I mean, it seems like there are so many things that have popped up for you recently between Thinkers 50 and all these other, things that are, putting you, at the top of your career. And yet I hear you loud and clear when you're saying, listen, I love helping other people learn. It never stops, right? But
it doesn't
just
stop.
Curious to say, what's next? Is there anything next that we should be aware of?
Tammy, you were asking me the same question they asked me when they pulled me up on stage at Thinkers 50. Somewhere there's a video of it, and I must sound like a babbling idiot because they shocked. I had no idea that I was getting a Thinkers 50 Radar Award. And I vaguely remember my heart was pounding so hard. It was just drumming in my ears. And I thought I was going to get a heart attack in my office. And I vaguely remember them saying something along the lines of what's next. And I kept thinking, what's next is I just want to lower my heart rate down. That's what's But really, I think, as I've now had a few weeks to start thinking about this, I already have some other books that I am starting to think about and put together and definitely increase the writing because, as I said, I am an adult educator by training. And one of the things I have learned, and I believe, is that there's more than one way to teach. And my favorite ways to teach are both by writing and by giving keynote talks, because I feel that I can reach people in a manner in which they will understand what I'm saying, but also drive them to action. So it's not a passive learning, it's an active learning.
Yes, yes.
And that's when you talk about the reason you want to wake up in the morning. That's my reason. I love doing that. It's being able to teach in these different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Love that. So when you think about other people making their transitions, you've made many over the years and you've helped other people make their transitions. Since this is a podcast about people making transitions, specifically, I'm trying to encourage people to make those transitions to something they really love to do versus just, oh, I can do that. I'm good at that. So what would be a key piece of advice you might give somebody who's realizing, I need to find what I love, or I'm ready to take that step?
I was just actually working with someone on their passion audit. And it's somebody who was wondering why they're not getting promoted. And we did this passion audit, and we quickly realized that the things she really disliked doing, it drained her, was what her job was. Those were the main responsibilities of her job. But what would you do for free if you could? And are you spending your weekends? And how are you spending your personal time?
Yeah.
We quickly found out that there's a whole other industry she could be a part of that she hadn't even considered.
Yeah.
And as we started talking about it, you could see just the stress melt off of her, and her face just lights up. So getting people to do that passion audit, to tap into what they're passionate about, is so, so, so important. I cannot stress that enough.
I totally agree. Great. We'll put it in bold in the show notes. Go do the passion audit. It parallels beautifully to an instrument that I use with people, and some exercises I use with people called the motivation factor. A lot of what you're talking about really ties in with that as well, all about the intrinsic motivation. So
important.
Listeners, think about that. What intrinsically motivates you? What I think another way to put it is, what's your why?
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I tell people, if you really want to look into it, go see how you spend your weekends.
Yeah.
What are you doing by choice?
Yeah.
And when you realize what you're doing by choice, that'll give you insight as to what you enjoy doing. The other way to think about it is, what do you procrastinate doing? Because when you procrastinate doing those things, you generally don't enjoy them. And when you're procrastinating, what are you procrastinating? What are you doing instead? That'll give you insight as well.
Yeah. Terrific. Ruth, thank you so much for being here today. I want to encourage people to keep your eyes and ears open for the Success Factor that will be out towards the end of January 2022.
Yes.
Can't wait. It's going to be at my bedside for sure. And thank you so much again for being here. This has been a delight and a thrill for me.
Likewise, Tammy. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited we were able to chat like this.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Dr. Ruth Gotian. It was so interesting to speak with her and learn about her personal and professional journey. What is your key takeaway from our interview? If you're interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them on the blog page of my website at tammygulerloeb.com. Just look for episode 161. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Perhaps you're feeling a little stuck? Check out my new book, Work from the Inside Out, Break Through 9 Common Obstacles to Design a Career That Fulfills You. It's available now in print and digital ebook editions through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and independent bookstores. If you were inspired by this episode with Ruth, please share it with your friends and colleagues. And please do subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? I would love it if you'd review it on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find through my website at tammygulerloeb.com/podcast. Just click on the Apple Podcasts button and follow the instructions provided there. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.